There are a few ways that I absolutely do not want to die. I really don't want to fall off something stupid high up. I also don't want to burn, and I don't want to drown or suffocate. I mean, all of those sound pretty terrible to me as a way to go. So because of that, the premise of the new Netflix film Oxygene really made me uncomfortable. A young woman wakes up in a cryogenic pod with no memory of who she is or how she ended up there. As she's running out of oxygen, she must rebuild her memory to find a way out of her nightmare. Melanie Laurent stars in this claustrophobic French thriller from Alexandre Aja. The concept for this is pretty simple. Our main character wakes up inside some sort of enclosure with wires and tubes attached to her, and she's surrounded by displays and gauges that are sounding some sort of alarm. She struggles to not only figure out what's going on, but also to come out of the fog of why she's there. Laurent is really the only character in this. I mean, we see some scenes with other people, but they're mainly without dialogue. There are a few voice actors, but they remain unseen. And this creates a lonely atmosphere that only compounds the tension of being inside that tight enclosure. There's also an urgency that is built into the storyline. Her air supply is getting lower, so her race to figure out what's going on and how to fix it are all wildly important, and all the while, there's a countdown taking place. Like I said, this is directed by Alexandre Aja, and I've really enjoyed some of his other thrillers and horrors. He knows how to create a terrifying atmosphere where the stakes feel very high. He's directed the recent surprise alligator horror Crawl, which I thought was a lot of fun, as well as the remake of The Hills Have Eyes, and one of my personal favorite horrors, High Tension. The cinematography in Oxygene is wonderful. I mean, we are placed right into the tight space with our protagonist, and the camera work effectively moves us about that space, feeling the closeness just of everything. It's cramped, tight, it's almost suffocating, and it's really impressive how they executed the shots. There are also some other aspects of the film where the visuals are meant to be a little disorienting or uncomfortable, and there are then others that are calming and beautiful, and the visuals really accomplish all of this well. These also provide us these mini breaks from the confines of the pod itself. Now, probably fairly quickly into the story, you're going to figure out some of what's going on. I think there is a portion that's decently predictable, but what I really liked is that there were some aspects that I didn't expect or see coming. The story holds enough back to keep us guessing at certain aspects. And there are some special effects that are used in this, and sometimes I thought they were really good looking, especially with some of the heads-up displays that we get and the features within the enclosure. But then there are a few times that it was very obvious that what we were seeing was computer generated. Now, luckily, I didn't feel that that played too large of an overall role in the story, so to have them a little lackluster wasn't too big of a deal. Now, even though the concept of this may not be wholly unique, it did hold my attention. I mean, we've seen it before where a character is in a confined area struggling to solve a problem before time runs out and bad things then happen to them. There was kind of this roller coaster of emotions going on where the narrative would create some extreme urgency and then have it wane back a bit to relax us slightly, and then it would ramp back up. And this went on several times, and it kept my blood pressure high. Laurent gives us a really moving performance. I believed the gamut of emotions that she was going through as she dealt with issue after issue. She was also able to create a sympathetic character despite very, very little initial backstory or development. And from a character standpoint, the emotional journey is fun to watch, but it's also emotionally exhausting. Half the fun of this is the tense mystery and its many facets. The isolated single character scenario also works really well for the story. It kind of reminds me a little bit of that Danish thriller The Guilty, where we have one person who we watch that carries out all the emotion, whether that's joy or terror or anything in between. The 100-minute runtime is just the right length too, I think. It's long enough to keep us engaged and keep the pace tight, but it's also not too long where the story begins to drag. And having a built-in time limit that the character is fighting against also really helps to keep the story moving. Because she's in a cryogenic pod, there are some medical elements to this, and a few of them did make me wince and squirm. And there's this scene in the latter half of the movie especially that just made me want to ball up because I could imagine the sensation of what was happening on screen. No. So despite the great tension that was built up through the course of the story, I'm not sure the movie as a whole is terribly memorable or one that would warrant repeat viewings. The acting is convincing and effective, and I was certainly engaged as everything progressed, but once it was over, I just wasn't left with an awestruck feeling or even one that was like, wow, that was really impressive. Yeah, it was fun, and I think certainly worthy of the watch, but I think that's all. It's a fun thrill ride that brings urgency and suspense, but when it's over, it's not something that stuck with me. There's no sex or nudity, a lot of profanity, and some violence. I give Oxygen 3.5 out of 5 couches. So are there any good claustrophobic thrillers you've enjoyed? I think I remember Ryan Reynolds being in a fairly decent one. What was it, the Buried? It's been a really long time since I've seen it, so obviously that, you know. But what about you? Share yours in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me. Should have done this to see how long I could just do a whole sentence with holding my breath and never, just not run out of air, and then I'd probably then just pass out or something like that. But then I have to talk really weird. I don't know why I'm talking really weird like this, and I'm still working on one breath here. Except, oh, no, I took a breath right there. Okay, there you go. Not very long.